October 1938. Somewhere in Spain. For over 2 years, daily life has been haunted by these ghosts. For over 2 years, the fearful faces of women and crying children have filled the front pages of newspapers and movie screens. 2 years and more that they've become a living remorse for everyone. These are the damned of the war in Spain. A civil war cleaving the Spanish people in two. Soldiers of General Franco versus the Republicans in power in Madrid. A war that will last 3 years. On September 29, 1938 in Munich, the German Reich signs a peace treaty with England and France. Everyone on that side of Europe breathes a sigh of relief. But it is over in Spain that Hitler has been preparing for war since 1936. There, Germany has been testing its equipment and men alongside Franco's nationalists. Opposing Franco, Hitler, and Mussolini, the Russians, British, and French joined the international brigades in what will be the dress rehearsal for World War II.
L'inhumaine guerre d'Espagne se poursuit.
Every day, newsreels spew the tragedy of war. The siege of Madrid, the battles of Toledo, Guadalajara, and Teruel. One man is not untouched by these images of misery that remind him how his absence over in Spain is unforgivable. His name is Joseph Kessel, otherwise known as Jeff, one of the greatest reporters of the 30s. But unlike Hemingway, Malraux, or Capa, he hadn't seen the ghosts of war. So when Pierre Lazareff, the director of the paper Paris Soir, presented him with a golden opportunity to go, Kessel didn't think twice. In war-torn Spain, he would experience for himself the powerful emotions he imagined behind the newspaper headlines. For 10 years, Kessel had been living at such a pace that he missed the Spanish conflict. He'd just turned 40. He was born in 1898 into a Russian family who lived in Argentina. His life was an adventure, and through it, journalism. He was also a popular novelist who sought inspiration from the tumults of the 20s and 30s, making them the stage for his tales. China, Djibouti, Aden, Berlin, Moscow. His heroes sprang out of the conflicts that were rocking the world. Kessel was paired with a photographer assigned to put his essays into images, Jean Moral. The report had to make a splash since public opinion was growing weary of the never-ending war. Kessel was given carte blanche to breathe new life into an inflamed and brutal era. On October 21st, 1938, Kessel and his photographer arrive at the end of the line. They enter Spain through the little village of La Junquera in Catalonia. For the past few months, refugees have been streaming through the border post of Pertus. And more are coming. The despondent Spaniards find themselves in camps near the border. Kessel is astonished. The day before, he ate lunch in a restaurant in Toulouse. But this morning, he can't even find a cup of coffee or rent a car. There seems to be nothing on this side of the border. For want of anything better, he hitches a ride on a bus filled with Civil Guard officers to venture deeper into Republican territory toward Barcelona, about 100 kilometers away. In the fields he crosses, he sees only old men, women, and children working. The men have all been off at war since August 1936. The women are running things now. Kessel dozes off as he approaches Girona and doesn't see the city in ruins. Shortly before Barcelona, a siren howls. Scouts alert the travelers that the city is being bombarded. It's the same story every night, the driver explains. The city is ablaze in the distance, pelted by Italian aircraft based on Franco's turf. It takes over an hour for the bus, with all its lights out, to drive the last 4 kilometers into Barcelona. Everything's pitch black in the ravaged city. Kessel finally sets to work on his first article. The title, War is Next Door. He wrote about Spain under attack, burning buildings, and the people tortured by 2.5 years of war. The two journalists settle in at the Gran Colón Hotel. They discover Barcelona in wartime, its population starving. People wait resignedly in long lines before the rare handful of shops still open. Their faces all pinched by hunger, all the underfed children, all their drab, tattered clothes. Men, women, and children are all frighteningly emaciated. Dreary poverty, austere discipline. The bread ration has been reduced to 100 grams a day per inhabitant. In this country at war, what food is available is mainly reserved for soldiers. For them, there's plenty of wine and white bread and fragrant rice to fill their plates. There's a feeling that the Republican leaders are sacrificing the population, who may as well simply starve to death. But there are no signs of rebellion. It's war, the women sigh as they wait outside distribution centers. What can we do? It's war. Countless children are evacuated, often to France, either by boat or via the border posts in the Pyrenees. Children who have lost their parents in battles or due to illness, and who will fill orphanages. But there is also the influx of poor souls who have left the battle zones of Galicia, Asturias, and the Basque Country for the regions that are still holding out. And the population of Barcelona swells from 1,200,000 to 3 million. All those people to house and mouths to feed. Though he'll refrain from writing it, the novelist in Joseph Kessel is disappointed. Refugees and homeless people, the black market, this is not the scene he'd expected to find. He'd been a war correspondent in Ethiopia, and his vision of history on the move is highly romantic, woven of passion, cruelty, epic sagas. He'd imagined quarrelsome, bloodthirsty gang leaders, workers shouting and firing cannons, fanatic and disheveled militiamen in dungarees wielding pistols. He thought he'd experience terror, explosions, atrocities. The heroines of the barricades of the first battles are gone, buried forever in his memory. Nowhere does he find the adventurous men that had always fascinated him. Only children playing soldier on the remnants of the demolished barricades. No, he hasn't seen this war yet. It's the shortage of cigarettes that finally makes him realize he's in a city at war. Everyone's looking for tobacco. They collect butts and barter. In Barcelona, a pack of cigarettes can buy soap, eggs, and a few vegetables. Kessel watches his provision of smokes dwindle to nothing. A few kilometers away, on the Ebro near Lerida, the two enemy armies clash. The Republicans launch a desperate attack to counter Franco's advance. Since he wasn't seeing the war, he would imagine it and share it with us. Every evening, he would record his impressions and write captions for Jean Moral's photos. Moral wasn't your usual reporter. In Paris and New York, he was a fashion photographer whose pictures stood out from the contained photos of the day. He was an innovative artist who undressed women and put them out in the street. The war correspondents gather at the bar of the former Ritz in Barcelona. A rumor makes its way around the bar. A Francoist offensive on Madrid is apparently underway. Kessel listens as Robert Capa tells the story of his photo of a militiaman getting shot. Not sure he's telling the truth. Like Hemingway, who between two benders, tells Kessel about his next novel inspired by the Civil War and its legendary characters. Together, they while the night away. Senior civil servants and businessmen flock to fleshpots. Profiteers await the collapse of the Republic so they can make deals with Franco. Accompanied by pretty young women who sell themselves for a bowl of lentils. Here, life goes on. People work, not out of patriotism, simply to survive. They wash, they sew, they clear ruins in exchange for a bit of ham, bread, or oil. They barter. Gas is rationed, electricity erratic, and at night, half the city is plunged in darkness. In spite of it all, the cafes in Barcelona find success by serving bad makeshift orangeade and tasteless coffee. Along the paseos, youth is out in all its glory, and nonchalant young ladies, eyes painted and hips swaying, watch the strollers. For 2 years, the same scenario replays over and over in the big cities. At noon each day, the inhabitants head underground to hide away. People glance worriedly up at the sky. Those used to strict discipline head straight for shelter, calmly at first, more hastily for latecomers.
Attention! Attention!
Underground in the metros, thousands of inhabitants head to their straw mattresses like hobos. Barcelona, the city of 3 million, transformed into catacombs, as if frozen in war. Bombarded, starving, how can they put up with the war without revolting? Widespread apathy. What use is it to fight, they think? After the bombs hit, the victims are gathered up. A picture of disaster. Broken necks, crushed chests. The day's dead are tossed into the body cart that passes as soon as the last plane has flown off. And the day's activity begins again. People sort through the rubble, seal up holes, rebuild. But Kessel hasn't seen any of this yet, because for the past 3 days, the noon attack hasn't happened. The residents have enjoyed a bit of a break. In autumn 1938, Spanish Catholics began celebrating Sunday Mass once more. For Spaniards, it offered a hint of their former life. Since 1936, the Republic had been persecuting priests. It massacred them, shot them, without any trial. Churches were burned and convents destroyed, a fanaticism in response to Franco's abuses. But things had changed. On Sunday, October 23, 1938, Kessel and Moral attend the first religious funeral service since the beginning of the war. As the priests pass by, crucifix held high, the crowd hesitates and observes each other silently. Eyes meet, fists rise. Everyone salutes as the hearse drives past. Barcelona, working class, communist and anarchist, has accepted its contradictions. Faith is rooted as deep in people's hearts as their patriotism. On October 25th, Kessel heads to the city of Poblet, a few kilometers from Barcelona, for an homage to the International Brigades. Jean Moral and Robert Capa accompany him. Fewer than 600 men survived the battles waged alongside the anti-fascist Republicans. They came from the US, France, Canada, Britain, and Austria, bearing the names of heroes of the Russian Revolution, muses of the Paris Commune, as others died by the thousands. For these, the adventure is over. But Kessel detects an uneasiness. He senses ingratitude, an unspoken relief at seeing them go, finally leaving the Spanish among themselves, capable of fighting their war on their own. Had they forgotten the debt they owed them? Perhaps Spain was fed up with being grateful. That very night, Kessel receives confirmation that the Francoist attack on Madrid is imminent, and he doesn't want to miss what is sure to be the denouement of the war. He must go. The only way around Franco's lines is to sail by boat to Valencia, then drive up to Madrid. That same day, the government press bureau takes Kessel to the harbor. The harbor, originally a colorful, lively place, has become a cemetery. Sunken ships and ravaged wharves. The Yardbrook is a British cargo ship, no doubt the oldest vessel still in service. 100 civilians and their paltry belongings wait to cross the gangplank. It's October 26th, and Kessel has only been in Spain for 5 days. The captain of the Yardbrook wants to reach open sea before the evening shelling begins. He's opened his lounge to journalists, but 118 passengers are down in the hold. The wind picks up. The sea is rough. The boat plunges over and over into troughs of 8 to 10 meters. Almost everyone on board is seasick. Jean Moral, the photographer, can't leave his berth. When he finally finds his sea legs, he reaches for his camera. These are his pictures. The next day, the exhausted faces register anxiety. Fear, too, since Franco's aircraft had been instructed to bomb ships entering the harbor. So the captain ups the speed. The engines are white hot. 7 knots. The Yardbrook trembles and feels like it's about to break apart. The journey lasts about 40 hours. The journalists walk the final 4 kilometers to Valencia. "15 minutes later, the harbor collapses in flames. The next day, the Madrid papers will tell how the harbor of Valencia had been bombed, claiming several lives, including the passengers of a cargo ship. To make the story even better, Kessel is convinced it's the Yardbrook that sank and that he was a survivor of its final voyage. To the eyes of the exhausted journalists, Valencia seems like an El Dorado. The inhabitants are lively and joyful, and fruit and wine are plenty. The war seems absent. The residents show no sign of their suffering, a way of enjoying the present moment to the hilt. In the face of danger, why should we stop laughing, strolling in the sun, and enjoying a coffee outdoors? The next day, they try to find a way to Madrid. Instead of a border, there's just a succession of fronts. The journey is dangerous, as the enemy is everywhere. The passengers pile into a rickety old truck filled with carabiniers. Jean Moral struggles to squeeze his photo gear in. Besides his cameras, he's got film and hundreds of magnesium lamps. Jeff's renown lands them a spot. As a famous journalist, he can get what he wants. Infinite, the landscape swallows up the passengers. Hamlets with their ancient facades riddled by bombs, mutilated churches. The convoy jostles along over the potholed road, blasted by the sun, whipped by wind and rain. There are over 400 kilometers of plains and hills to cross. They're exhausted, and their limbs are battered. share something about themselves. The driver is an olive picker who fought in Andalusia, Madrid, and in the Levant. He's 20 and already has 3 wounds he wears like medals. The liaison officer is a printer. Another is a lawyer. Though today, he's a stretcher bearer. These men have survived every battle. The villages they cross are like fortresses under siege where the inhabitants hide away. When the trucks pass, children chase behind to collect the scraps of food that are tossed out. For there are no provisions, and all they have to eat are their meager crops. They buy grapes, eggs, oil, and tomatoes. In exchange for a few cigarettes, bottles are brought up from the basements. It's a sunny Sunday. Shyly at first, then more openly, teenage girls grow bold and venture a smile. They blush in confusion behind their mothers. Poor women, full of dignity despite their faces riddled with anxiety. In Spain, life and death come hand in hand. The truck has almost reached Madrid. Along an invisible front, it passes carcasses of burnt cars that remind everyone the war is indeed present. The road belongs to the soldiers, those heading off on leave or those transporting the mail. The army controls and searches the cars. The convoy enters Madrid at dusk. There's been no Francoist offensive launched on the capital. The rumor was false. But no neighborhood in the capital has gone untouched. Even if Kessel sees nothing, Madrid is under the fire of cannons and machine guns, as the war is only a short walk away. The front runs right through the city. Here are the Republican lines, over there the enemy's. War has entered people's hearts, a slow weakening. Workers, carabiniers, civil servants all act as they can. The trash cans never stay full for long. They're emptied as soon as the sun goes down. Women walk for hours to glean an old sack of potatoes. And minutes after a shelling, they race to the rubble to gather wood. A constant quest for survival. Jeff sets out to find an informer whose address he was given. It's that of old Chicote, Hemingway's favorite bar. On the way, he observes the residents of Madrid filling the sidewalks. Neither happy nor sad, he is surprised to see. Dreary poverty, austere discipline. Crowds spill out of cafes, and there, in the midst of all the chaos, children play marbles, old folks warm themselves in the sun. Women wait pensively. Their clothes are shabby yet clean. Some wear makeup despite the restrictions. Kessel did not join the clientele at Hotel Florida, the headquarters for reporters and intellectuals in Madrid. The rooms most exposed to the shelling cost $1. but it's 3 times that for one sheltered from the bombs. Instead, Kessel heads to the Ritz, where he usually stays in Madrid. A room with sun exposure, the only heat available since coal and heat are nowhere to be found. But the hotel isn't what it used to be. The sheets and towels are threadbare from being scrubbed against stone in the absence of soap. Maitre-d's in livery serve meals of tasteless lentils and dried-out cod in silver dishes at steep prices. On the other hand, the Ritz's wine cellar is overflowing with champagne. But Jeff's extravagant expense account provides him every excess. At dusk, Madrid springs to life, carefree and turning a deaf ear to suffering. Theaters and music halls are filled to capacity, more for the heat than for the show or the bad Malaga wine. Reservations are required, and preview showings are all the rage. On November 1st at 5 p.m., Kessel attends a performance of the successful operetta Paris Minuit at the Zarzuela, starring Nina de los Peines and Conchita Muñoz. He's in luck. That night, the song sung by Ana Mary, the Spanish Shirley Temple, doesn't get interrupted by bombs. A successful singer has thrown cigarettes under the envious eyes of the audience. Tobacco is worth more than a fistful of dollars and can buy almost anything. When the theater's let out, the spectators are engulfed by darkness and hurry home in the cold and rain to their unlit, unheated abodes where no food awaits. Explosions rock the sky without any way of knowing if it's a celebration or enemy bombs. Kessel encounters heroism in the offices of the Havas press agency on Plaza de las Cortes in the person of a local photographer said to be named Juan Mayo. Behind the signature lie several reporters, 5 brothers, an agency unto themselves. They photographed the battles of Toledo, Aranjuez, Teruel, and Ciudad Universitaria in Madrid. Juan Mayo lives with camera in hand. If it shakes, he says, the photo is ruined. He tells how he got the picture of 3 boys lying next to an unexploded bombshell. His photos make the front pages of newspapers around the world. Death awaits with each step, Mayo tells Jeff. He glimpses it behind each victim he photographs. He admits his fear, but without boasting, claims he'll do anything to get a good shot. But now, Juan is a war photographer who's out of work, since nothing more is happening. A bit embarrassed, he shows Jeff what he's been reduced to take photos of for a living. The next morning, outside the National Library, photographer Jean Moral encounters soldiers carrying paintings by the great masters, tapestries and statues. A Rubens is even concealed beneath a blanket. Kessel's head spins at the sight of all this wealth. Faiences, silverware, bound manuscripts, ciboriums, a hodgepodge of marvels. Although the city is starving, The Republic doesn't skimp when it comes to protecting its heritage of artworks abandoned in the crumbling churches. Experts make an inventory, then restore them. The treasures also are used as bargaining chips with arms dealers operating in the city. It's hard for Joseph Kessel not to feel love for these figures and shades. The war is no longer a battle of starving peasants rebelling against greedy landowners backed by the clergy. The war is shared between German and Spanish soldiers, between fascists and patriots. Kessel knows which side he's on, even if it took him a while to get involved. But he sees the anger of this peaceful people. He discovers the profiteers. He sees the pain of the peasants massacred with truncheons. He sees a just battle. Yet he can't forget the young boy shot by the Republicans. They found a medallion of the Virgin around his neck. That was all it took to accuse him of being a Francoist. He was told to either disown his friends and fight against them, or else he'd be shot. He didn't accept the blackmail and was executed. Republican or Francoist, Kessel has always preferred men over ideas. But in Madrid, as in Barcelona, he still hasn't seen real war. He doesn't want to return to Paris without having seen the front. He wants an honorable conclusion to his report. The war? Get yourself a tramway ticket and you'll see the war, he's told by the field commander, a former baker from Valladolid. That same day, Moral and Kessel head to the university campus. They must cross the entire city to reach it. The trenches, blockhouses, and nests of machine gunners are reminiscent of World War I and bear witness to the violence of the clashes. The Chemistry Institute and medical school are completely destroyed. It's a landscape of destruction. Look at the smoke way over there. Shh. That's the front line, whispers a soldier behind his rifle. 5 meters away is the enemy post. 30 of our men are buried underneath, whispers another. A sweet, sticky, sickening stench. The smell of a mass grave. In the underground passages linking the various buildings, Kessel hears nothing but the laughter of the soldiers who joke and drink as they play dominoes. This man was a ladies' hairstylist in Paris. Every weekend, he returns home to see his wife and children, like any other traveling salesman. All he needs is a round-trip tramway ticket. Kessel has the strange feeling that this war is completely unlike anything he's seen before. He's a long way from the sulfur and sweat heroism he'd hoped to see. Forget the war portraits of boys photographed by Mayo or Robert Capa's picture of the militiamen. For want of anything better, Kessel seeks subjects that can raise the awareness of his readers. People from the daily life of a city under siege. The spectacle of the street, since war, proves elusive. In a cafe at the Plaza de Levante, he meets Ramon Ortega, a Francoist matador who'd been sentenced to death by the Republicans. Before his execution, he was ordered to fight 6 wild bulls in the Valencia arena. And with nothing to lose, he did what no one would ever witness again. For the beauty of the art, he met the challenge and embraced every risk. He slew all 6 bulls before an ecstatic crowd and was pardoned. In gratitude, he decided to remain in the Republican camp. He went from bullfighter to driver, and Kessel hired him to drive him around Madrid for his short stay there. He also grew fond of Juan, a rather bohemian composer who, one night when he was drunk, had written the Francoist anthem for a pint of beer. Ever since, he has lived in shame at having collaborated with Franco. So he gave up alcohol, he told Kessel, and tries to make up for it by composing battle hymns and rousing Spanish Republicans to combat. The sight of people leaving the International Red Cross in tears gives Kessel the idea for one of his most beautiful stories. He focuses on the anxiety of families separated by war. These people naked and disarmed, waiting for news of a loved one. Like the wife of a Francoist nobleman looking for her husband who was arrested by the police, or a worker from Santander whose wife was killed in a bombing, united in their distress. Some of these poor folk don't even know how to read and live in fear of receiving a letter announcing a death, a divorce, or simply a disappearance. Others go away empty-handed as they have for 18 months. It's also at the Red Cross that he learns the story of 2 brothers, Parisians from Belleville, children of a Renault factory worker and a seamstress who came to Spain to fight. One for the Nationalists in the Joan of Arc Legion, and the other in the International Brigade. They had both enlisted at the start of the war, and their mother's heart was torn over it. After violent fighting to defend Madrid in the battles of Brunete, Guadalajara, and on the Ebro, a twist of fate found them both fighting the same day near the university campus in Madrid. Between attacks, they called out to each other for news of their mother. Then, as the battle raged harder, they insulted each other in Parisian slang. The brothers fought relentlessly against each other in the battle that opposed them. Weren't they ever afraid of killing each other? After the war, astonished to still be alive, the 2 brothers reunited and wept for the war they each lost. And it was through the International Red Cross that their mother learned that her 2 sons had survived the war. On November 5th, 1938, Kessel is invited to a banquet at the Emergency Services headquarters. But he decides to go elsewhere, to a real black market dinner that promises a wealth of copious dishes, a far cry from the usual restrictions. But as the sun sets at 8 p.m., the first bombs are dropped. Then another wave 2 hours later. A succession of shells blasts the venue where Kessel was supposed to have been.
Nah.
ceiling collapses and the air fills with fire, smoke, and steel fragments. The death toll rises to about 40 horribly mutilated corpses, among them a fair number of his friends. Kessel was supposed to be with them that night, but he wasn't, and so he survived. The next day at dawn, he heads to the bomb site. The floor is splattered with blood. The plates are still filled with lentils and sardines from the meal. An abandoned cap. Jean Moral captures these dramatic images on film. At last, he has his images of war, his dose of emotion and adrenaline. Kessel the scavenger? Is that what those who died in Spain thought of him? And the reports that earned his renown, were they not written with the blood of his victims? There's nothing more to keep him in Madrid. So that very day, they leave for Alicante, where Air France flies a liaison to Toulouse. But the planes are full. There, Kessel finds the material for his 11th and final article, relating how wealthy notables fled the country in anticipation of the fall of Madrid and Franco's victory. Thanks to the station master, a friend of Mayor Moses from the airmail days, Kessel boards instead of the bigwigs panicking at the counter. From Toulouse, Kessel travels up to Paris, where he holes up to pen his account. November 17, 1938, the journal Match publishes Jean Moral's first pictures. Joseph Kessel's written accounts appear exclusively in Paris Soir. Based on his encounters, Kessel offers a truth which isn't exactly the truth. But what he writes is more powerful than the truth. His 11 articles published by Paris Soir on November 27, 1938, offer the true reflection of a dying Republican Spain, the upcoming demise of the Spanish dream. War is next door. Kessel returns to Madrid in February 1939. The Spanish Republic is collapsing day after day. The press demands descriptions steeped in sorrow, and Kessel finds the right words to render the Spanish drama. The war had claimed over 300,000 lives, half of them civilian. An entire population funnels into France through the border posts in the Pyrenees. France and her allies learn the cost of failing to support the Republic. Over 300,000 political prisoners swell Franco's prisons, and thousands of opponents will be executed by him. It's February 1939, and a few months later, World War II breaks out.